Shall I introduce that?
Yes.
Today, for the induction of our coherent group in terms of the meditation, what we call a meditation, I've asked Robin to read from a card that I used from and continue to use to some degree for many years, that has a message from Papaji. When I used it on the card, I didn't know to attribute it to him, but since then I found out, and it's just it's like a blessing, and it's like a bringing into awareness true nature. So Robin's going to read it for us to start the meditation.
You are the unchangeable awareness in which all activity takes place. Always rest in peace. You are eternal being, unbounded and undivided. Just keep quiet. All is well. Keep quiet here and now. You are happiness. You are peace. You are freedom. Do not entertain any notions that you are in trouble. Be kind to yourself. Open to your heart and simply be.
And so it is. Thank you all for being here together with us. All of us together. To understand that in any moment when the thinking mind is not running the show, you are in the field that we call meditation. I often refer to it as the quantum field or our true nature. It's the awareness out of which everything arises. It's sometimes referred to as consciousness. It's already always what's there, unless we're overriding the experience and the oneness with it through the thinking mind, which is fundamentally fear-based. So when we start to come home to our true nature, what we're looking for is what's already there and available to us and needs to be recognized in any short moments where that's what you're knowing, that's what your knowing is. You're realizing it'll feel like peace, it'll feel like connection, it'll feel like ease and no problems, right? And that is always the opening into, and often the full experience of our true nature as awake awareness. It's only been recently that I equated and understood in my own experience that what we call the quantum field is analogous to awake awareness, that as source of all that is, it's the same. It's the one space. I am that awareness, that sourceness, the immediacy and the presence of that arising and overflowing and creating realities. Knowing ourselves as that, we're no longer held in a frequency of fear. Identified with our mind and with the body-mind unit, we're fundamentally caught in a frequency of fear, concern. The mind takes over, and the frequency of that mind fundamentally is fearful. So as many of us have interest in what I call, for myself anyway, the kindergarten model of quantum physics and the way reality works from that level. Science is moving right along and catching up with consciousness, with awake awareness, with the spiritual understanding of the nature of reality, because it's been held in those through the early spiritual masters and teachers, pointing to what science is now revealing as the way of reality. Is it raining outside? Wow. Sorry about the weather report, the bathroom report. That's the way it is here on Maui. Yeah, that's wonderful. And so we have these models showing up in sometimes what I call a kind of, what would I say? Like ordinary people who are interested in science, who are interested in spirituality and interested in the way they correlate. Because frequency is obviously the way of this reality. And that's what the quantum physics world is pointing to. One of the things that's become apparent, and I've talked about it before, I don't ever know if I'll come from the same, if I will be approaching the topic in the same way I did in the past. And always that's for any of you to call to my attention or engage with me regarding it. But when we talk about the way in which frequency creates, one of the correlations I've made in my own study and consideration of what quantum physics was so enlivened by back at the turn of the century, well, in the 1930s, I think, was called the double slit experiment. And what it pointed to was how the experience of consciousness in regard to a scientific experiment, shifted the materiality from wave to particle. And most of you know this, some version of this double slit experiment where light waves were projected through two slits to see what the patterns would be created on a far wall. And at the moment when they had the scientist present for this experiment, measuring the light waves, it's called the collapse of the wave function. The light waves turned into particles, and they could see the pattern on the far wall. That's not the whole story with this, but that sets up the analogy that I like to make with how we influence how our world shows up. The way that we measure, we are interacting energetically with the quantum field, is what we're believing, what we're experiencing, what we're projecting there. And so when the quantum field is scintillating with potentiality and possibility, it's alive, it's the source of everything that shows up. And then I am that's what's true of all of us. We are that. That's our true nature. And the input that we have then, having identified ourselves with being a body mind, caught in fear, our concern, our consideration, now we have the field of quantum possibility, and our input into it is fear, our concern, our limitation. And then that field is the source of what our material 3D reality shows up as. Now, this would be not an acceptable description for anybody who understood the science better than I do. But we know it in our own experience. We know how our mind affects our reality. We've all had that experience. As a man thinketh, right? And the frequency of that fear-based thought as information into potentiality that then shows up as a reality. The way in which we create our reality is best described by that kindergarten model. And so we have the opportunity to understand where source in the matter of our external reality, including our body and our body mind, comes from. And as we become more aware of that, then we can be with what potentially transforms that. And what that is to come home to ourselves, to come out of our wounded, conditioned identity. I'm not good enough, I don't matter. And that's the work that we do in our Sangha, is to clear out the frequency of fear that when it's imposed on the quantum field shows up as a limited reality. This is not to create blame or to create self-judgment. It's to understand how this works. We've all deeply intuited that there's a part that we play in how our reality shows up. This is more specifically a direction in understanding that. Not to blame ourselves, but so that we start to see where we can come home to our own heart, to our own nature. And from that, and clearing that of frequency of fear and self-judgment, we begin to play our part in redreaming the world. So for the Sangha here and for the extended Sangha that we have on Zoom and with people that I work with, that's our goal. Nearly all of us have felt that our lives were purposeful and that we came here to make a difference in one way or the other. And this is the actual engagement with the creation of a shift in reality. I invite all of you to interact with me today regarding this, in regard to whatever is going on with you that feels like limitation, or with any explication or inquiry that can further help us to come together with this understanding.
Tashina,
Is Tashina here now?
yeah, Tashina, yeah, so she.
It's really dark in our living room here.
Hi, Polly.
Hi,
Back
sweetheart.
here.
Yeah.
You were describing awake awareness and what your experience is with it. And in the past, I've heard you speak about spiritual bypass. And I would just love to have you share, your experience of spiritual, you shared your spiritual bypass, but then when you describe what awake awareness is, it could really easily, if we grabbed onto what it is in our minds or whatever, it could really turn into a spiritual bypass in innocence in some kind of way, where we are, creating a beautiful life. Because on Maui, it's easy to create a beautiful life. There's an amazing community. There's beauty everywhere. It's just an awe-filled day. And and I guess I in my own experience, if I may, I'm asking a question, but I'd also like to just share that one way I've been looking at, in addition to the 6 steps of dealing with not being spiritual bypass, is being honest with friends on my own behalf. So I'm changing patterns, but instead of not saying anything about them, I'm actually saying it out loud and then doing something different, so that there's awareness in my community as well to support that change. So just, really looking for that difference between when we're really awake awareness and we've landed and we're home, and when it kind of comes in and out, and then when there's a tendency to have spiritual bypass because we're desiring to be awake.
Right. Yeah. There's such it seems as if there is a fine line of distinction regarding that, but we have such, we always have available, if we're willing to allow ourselves to be in touch with what we're experiencing. There's no, there's no way that we're not cognizant of what is the subtle distinction between what feels good. We try the spirit of what the expression is going to be. We're coming in touch with one of the things that you're pointing to is the self-abandonment that occurred when we concluded, I don't matter, or I'm not good enough. The installation of that early conclusion has been so repressed. It's what we don't know about ourselves. It's what we can't acknowledge because we've been actually programmed to override it, to put what I call putting sugar over shit. We've been programmed to everything's great, right? But the allowing of it to come up and the risk that it feels like, which it does feel risky, is to say what's true, which you're pointing to in terms of being on your own behalf. Coming home to ourselves. What happened early on was really self-abandonment. We abandoned ourselves with the conclusion, I don't matter, I'm not good enough. And that repression of that then began to create a distortion field. And now we're seeing through the distortion field of that self-concept. So as we start to come home to our true nature as awake awareness, aware of that, and no longer so 100% totally identified with the conclusion, the self-concept that got put into play,
Mhm.
then it feels like you're describing, it feels like it's uncertain. And there are questions about, am I just being a bad friend, or is this what I really need to say? But the test is, and we need to risk on the side of overstepping our being on our own behalf. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that if there's a question, like if somebody expects you to do something and you have a concern about, but I don't really want to do that, I wonder if that's my adaptive behavior, and that, then err on the side of not doing it, right? It's like coming home to ourselves for a while can seem like saying no more often than what our adaptive behavior in trying to be the good girl or the good guy would have had us being the nice person. And so the programming, as we undo the programming, it feels a little uncertain, just like you described. The spiritual bypass comes along, and for most everybody here probably was put in place to appear to be much more gracious and much more gracious and accepting than they actually felt, right? And because it's been asserted that that's what the good person, how they express, how they show up. And so we can start to have that kind of expression, but it hasn't gone into the arena that we want to go into, to start to undo all of the gnarly ball of yarn that installation put into place, out of which we have lived our entire lifetime. And we live out of it in our moment by moment response reaction to the world, to each other, to circumstances. And just that, one of the things I talk about is that what we gave up when we created our adaptive behavior, what we gave up was our authenticity, because it wasn't safe if you're the 4-year-old girl whose daddy is mad at mommy and comes home after a lot of drinking, and it's not safe to say, I don't like it when you act that way. But it may be safe, or feel safe, to say, oh, daddy, I wanted to show you how well I did in school today, to be a good girl, to distract him. Many things may feel safe. Being authentic is probably not one of them. So we give up our authenticity, and this reclaiming of our authenticity and the way that we work together in this Sangha has to do with coming back to being on our own side by telling the truth about what I want to experience, and risking that in that truth telling, I'm going to alienate a friend or have somebody think poorly of me. It can be a high bar, and it certainly feels, for sure, it feels threatening to the status quo, and it is, but the status quo is not working anymore. That's why we're all here together, right? It doesn't work not to say what's true for me anymore. And I have the potential in that clarity of truthful expression, the potential for my reality, my world, my experience is for it to become lighter and brighter, because that's the nature of authenticity. And again, it's what we gave up with our early adaptive behaviors. So the slippery slope that you're describing is absolutely at play as we are on the journey to coming home to ourselves. But to be aware that that's what it is, and to always, when you can, remind yourself that what you're wanting is full self-expression. You want connection, you want the experience of aliveness that's not overlaid by limitation or a feeling of being wrong or not good enough anymore. To know who I am is the goal of this incarnational possibility at this juncture. And what it can lead to collectively is, like I talk about, a redreamed reality, a dream of reality that shows up, that's no longer caught in negativity, that's no longer caught in polarity, that's no longer caught in fear. That's the world that we are all wanting. And the reason that we're finding out that we want it that way is all of the things that used to suffice to make us think we were satisfied don't anymore. They don't work anymore. Yeah. So thank you for that,
Yeah,
Tashina.
that's great, Polly. I feel like I'm aligned right with what you said and how you expressed it so beautifully. And I've been super grateful for the community that is surrounding in my community, surrounding us, or our Sangha, because being on my own behalf, been able to share honestly, like, wow, I've been really, in an outer orbit right now, and I've been feeling like, sensitive about it, and just telling what feelings are coming up based on my conditioning.
Yeah.
Honestly, and it's giving permission to others to be on their own behalf.
That's right.
And to reflect back to me that that's not what they're feeling, that what my made up story was,
Right.
Or whatever. It's really been neat just to open up the communication and dialogue and exchange of honesty, vulnerability, and being on my own integrity and my own behalf.
Yeah, and that's at the level of the Sangha, at the level of the meeting of the minds, at the level of joining together from the highest potential that we can allow to arise out of the coherence. That's the goal, and it does change the world. The staying in our own isolated, fear-based patterns keeps us at the level not. The reason that we're all into relationship is because that's the best we can do, coming from a fear-based identity. But coming from our true nature, connection is that's what's already true. But it doesn't get to be seen or experienced as long as we're caught up in adaptive behaviors to try to be the good person, or to try to be appropriate, or even to try to be reactive or a rebel. Those are all roles that make us relational, but not experiencing what's already true, which is the connection and the oneness, with the fun of the variety and the fun of the expression of the body-mind units.
Beautiful.
That's
That's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Tashina.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, Polly. So
Who is that?
it's Elise.
Elise. Hi, honey.
Hi, sweetie. So I had an experience. So last Saturday, I forgot an appointment. And it was an appointment I was really looking forward to, and it was with a friend. And I went into getting down on myself, and I shouldn't have forgotten. And I remember that morning, so how did I forget? But I went into this whole reaction. But the surprising part for me was I didn't realize it was a reaction until the next morning. And when I realized I'd reacted, I was like, wow, I really thought that was normal behavior. I thought, this is how I'm supposed to act if I forget an appointment with somebody that I've made. And it shocked me.
Yeah.
It was like, my God, here I'm doing all this work, meditating, focusing on myself. And so I realized how, like your statement in the beginning, to be kind to ourselves and to, like, yeah, it's like, to be kind to myself. Right? And anyway, I thought it was good because it did show me how, wow, I react and I don't even know it, and I think that's normal and even appropriate reaction, like that's how I'm supposed to act. But it really goes in line with everything you're saying about like being in this world and being nice and acting the way you're supposed to, or being appropriate. And it's like, that's not what I have. That's not how I want to live my life anymore.
Yeah, and it points to that collective conditioning, right? That you thought that was the way you would, that anybody should react if they had forgotten an appointment. And yeah, there's so much of that going on. So that's why it creates such a We need to become hyper vigilant in a way to be alert to the ways in which we're on automaticities, just into reacting and being had and presenting or speaking or showing up in ways that are not authentic. That not being authentic is a subtle but a very specific energy against yourself. And we've all been conditioned. The collective conditioning is to be a nice person. And then we what we create out of that is, at some point or another, what will tend to happen is that we will withdraw or shut down, or we will be overly solicitous. Usually that goes on for a while. But when we are not coming home to ourselves, coming back to our true nature, noticing what we've installed that has kept us against ourselves, then we'll be caught up in that collective conditioning. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's Marty. For me, it was when I first began to actually think about standing on my own behalf. I felt like I was really being not a good friend,
Right.
and not a good person, because it was like, I said I would go to this event, and now I don't want to go. I'm tired. I've worked. I'm done. And so, but I would go simply because I didn't want to hurt somebody else, and yet I hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the one that was not being kind. I wasn't being kind to me. And that was the hardest thing. And I still find that there are times when I have difficulty actually, well, not as much anymore. I am capable more now of standing and just actually seeing. But I think the greatest thing I ever learned from you was I forgive myself for ever having the belief that ever created that thought that I needed to be everything to everybody, or to be liked, or to be nice, or to be a good girl, or to be whatever. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Marty. Yeah, that's a high bar because of the conditioning collectively, and then our own individual experience with maybe sometimes not fulfilling what we thought somebody else expected of us, and then having the backlash from that, or the repercussions from that. So it gets installed, and then it gets imprinted. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes regarding Ramana Maharshi, where he had a devotee come up to him and say, because Ramana had been talking about the one, I am that, and that everything arises out of that. And so the devotee comes up and says, but Bhagavan, what do we do about the others? And Ramana says, there are no others. And so we know that this is it can appear to be solipsistic in a way, but it's the fullness of access that each one of us has to the field. And when we make that difference by coming home to ourselves, we are not just acknowledging, but energetically shifting a frequency of a collective reality. It's the collective conditioning has been so overwhelming in all of the arenas of life, whether it's life purpose or money or relationship or food or all of the different ways in which we think that there's an out there that we have to be in response, reaction, relationship to. But all of that has been a product of the collective conditioning and our using the collective conditioning experience through the distortion field of our own woundedness. So it creates a kind of a multifaceted difficulty but the clarity can come with just that question: what do I want to experience? And to allow that to be enough, even when underneath that, for most all of us, there might be the doubt that has to do with what you were just expressing, Marty, of what are they going to think about me? Or or like you, at least I promised I would do that. Yeah, so it's like allowing all of this to arise and seeing through it. And the way to see through it is the realization that if I can see it, it's not who I am. If I can see it, I have access to it. I have access to a different choiceful behavior or response. I have access to the choice I'm making for myself, perhaps of not responding or not being, or not doing what I said I would do. Risking on behalf of coming home to oneself can be a really high bar, but that's what changes your reality. Because when you come home to yourself on your own behalf, you're literally you are informing the quantum field with a different frequency that then shows up in your reality as being on your own side.
Yeah, Judith has her hand up when you're ready. Yeah. Go ahead, Judith.
I don't want to interrupt you, Pali. It's
I
not my
need
intention.
to be interrupted.
No, your hand was very quick. I would like to hear what you think about, as you know, I'm since a few years, I'm working with you and with these 6 steps. And it was so wonderful then to realize what conclusion I made and then to forgive myself. And just recently I thought, but one really important step is to be connected with your feelings.
Mhm.
Do you agree about this? This is the crucial point, I think.
Right.
Because we are so wounded in our feelings, or then in the experience, or what you are feeling is not true, and so on, then it's very easy to put shit on sugar, as you say, because you don't want to, or you don't believe your feelings even.
Right. Yeah, that the feelings can certainly be a kind of parameter or barometer to what we're doing to ourselves. Oh, it's going to always look like we're feeling something because of something external. Not always, but that's often the case, that they made me feel that way, whether it was mom and dad or the relationship or whatever. But the feelings always come after the thought. And so even the acknowledgement and the experience and the awareness of the feeling state is very, very powerful in helping us see what we've been believing or thinking. So and that acknowledgement, that being kind to ourselves regarding it, because what happened with the early feeling when the child was dismissed or neglected or abused, that conclusion was energetic. At some point or another, it got described in language that then got installed, and actually the frequency got installed before that. So the feelings are certainly a part of it. And that's why in the 6 steps to freedom process, we go to what is that feeling, to name that feeling, because that feeling is going to take you into the early experience. The acknowledgement, the willingness to see the feeling without self-judgment is a huge step on showing up for ourselves and being on our own behalf. Right? Is that helpful, Judith?
Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And even the reminder that the thought is before the feeling, and that the feeling is a guidance as well to our thinking. That's yeah. Thank you.
It's often not obvious to us because we're so accustomed to paying attention to reactive feelings, our feelings in general, that we miss that there was a thought there that initiated that opening into that experience.
Yeah, Debbie. You're gonna unmute yourself.
Who is it?
Debbie, oh, you're muted, sweetie. You're muted. There, try now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Hey, we got you.
Alright. All right, great. I had an experience this morning like that, and there's a little erosion that's been happening in my relationship with Ron. And because he's extremely helpful to me and he's brilliant and he helps me figure out a lot of things about, taxes, cars, things I'm not that good at. I think I've fallen into a pattern of allowing him to say things when I haven't asked. So the feeling came, the thought and the feeling where I feel controlled. And so I had that go by a couple times before I could get up the courage to risk expressing myself and not be the good girl. But I remembered something you told us, Polly, that I think might have come from Katie, I'm not sure. But I found what came out of my mouth was, I'm unhappy with you being in my business. And it felt so clean that I felt fabulous afterwards. And he heard it because it was clean.
Yes.
And so it solved the issue for now, it'll come again.
Right.
So I was very happy about being able to find that language.
Yeah, it's powerful. What the way in which something that's authentically stated lands, it doesn't create as much reaction as what if we're trying to mitigate our expression of
Yes.
what we might think of as being critical of another, then it gets all murky and then there's reaction, right? But
Yeah.
the authenticity and the clarity that comes with that has things, they're just cleaner, aren't they?
Yeah, because I've felt a lot of them not clean, where I'm in rebellion and then I act out. So it felt really good to find that way this morning.
That's so good. Thanks, Debbie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, we keep trying to strategize or ameliorate our expression, believing that we can make it. We don't know where we don't know who they're being or where it's going to land or anything. So our only access to clarity is our own authenticity. We can't modify or try to shape things so that out of our projection onto an apparent other that they would receive it better, and that because the reason that we're doing that is a frequency of fear, and so it's already compromised.
Yeah.
I just want to add that I love it when Max says you're out of my business or out of your business, because I don't get reactive, and it's like, you're right, I am. And it's just that one statement alone really, really works. So anybody in a relationship here, I highly recommend it. Well, Katie used to say, stay out of it's God's business, it's your business, and it's their business.
Right. There are only three kinds of business.
Right. Yeah.
God's business, my business, and your business.
Exactly.
I don't take care of God's or yours, and I usually don't even bother with mine.
That's the way about you are talking.
Yes, Mahalia,
Mahalia.
you're muted. Yeah. I'm not hearing you. Can you unmute?
There we go.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about how the oneness that includes everything with nothing left out split off. In us, it's somehow we've split off and believing we're separate or feeling that way. I find it really kind of hilarious that in all of this oneness, this little bits of God are going, no, I'm not, I'm not part of this. I mean, I don't understand how that happened. And also, what's the other thing? So there's that. And then there is the awareness. And then at some moment, there's a forgetting. And that moment I find is murky. I don't remember exactly when that was, not exactly. But when I come back awake, that moment is always very crystal clear. Just wanted you to speak to that as well.
And that moment that you're referring to, Mahalia, is that in regard to the ontological early, how did these little bits of God get so screwed up? Is it in, are these two things? These are two things.
Two separate issues, yeah, questions.
Yeah. So the second one, the clarity that comes, it's murky when? What is that murkiness that you're pointing to?
Well, so I'm awake and conscious, and then at some point I go out of that, and I'm not clear when that is. I don't catch it. I'm in the less clear place, but somehow I come back in, and that moment is very clear.
Right. Yeah. So what happened, I think of it, I think of it as the off-gassing of our wounded identity. It's like it's you know, it creates itself into being an entity of sorts in a way, and because it is an identity. And so when it's off-gassing, the murkiness comes in, and then as you relax out of your mind in whatever way you got caught there, then the clarity comes. So it is an on and off again kind of thing for a while. In terms of my favorite story, as most everybody here knows for sure, that's allegorical and to describe the dynamic ontologically of the fall. It's the fall, the idea that we were in our hearts in the sense of the oneness and the connection, and with the garden, with God, with everything. But then we were in the temptation of wanting to be as God, which is one way to talk about it. We were shifted out of our connection experience of oneness and into our mind with the polarity of good and bad and black and white and the whole polarized language created mind-made identities. And now out of that, we are caught in fear, shame, and guilt. And that's kind of the ontological response that I think is the best one, because I think we can all kind of identify with that. For some of us, an early experience might have been a happy babyhood or happy toddlerhood or whatever, and then something happened. That's like the garden story. Something happened in the innocence. I got caught up in an idea of a me, this conscious sense of being separate, and who I thought was one with me now is standing over there telling me I did something wrong. So we all go through the ontology of what's so beautifully offered in Genesis of the fall. But collectively, I think that that's a way to talk about it. I don't necessarily think that anything really happened like that, or that anything actually happens in our experience. It's more like a bad dream, and it's a dream of separation. But we can wake up out of that, and that's what is the fundamental answer, you know.
So back to the, so there's the unclarity and less awareness and consciousness. Can you speak to how, I mean, I have my own tools, but wondering what you think about how you get yourself to remember more often and to come back into that more clearly and full on awake again,
Yeah. Well, what does it typically? I always say, as a reference to what's offered here on Maui, you barely ever wake up walking through the lavender fields. But because what we'll typically do, what'll get our attention is suffering. And what gets our attention is a feeling of separation. And so that's kind of the wake-up call. And that's the alert to realizing, as in a kind of little encapsulated way, I say, if you're suffering, you're believing something that's not true. That's something from Byron Katie right there. So it's like the realization that I'm caught up in a pattern, a fear-based pattern of separation, and it doesn't feel good. And so it's that experience of isolation, of not feeling good, that gets our attention, so that we know that we're off base. We're caught now in an identity of separation, and the early identity, and that feeling. And that's what I use, or we use in the 6 steps to freedom, to use the feeling experience, like I was speaking to Judith about, using that feeling experience to go into whatever it was that got installed as an identity, because that identity is operating. It's an operating system. It's creating, that's like an automatic. So we have to become conscious, and becoming conscious typically is most available when it doesn't feel good, when we're suffering. So that's the alert, you know, and it can get subtle, but to start to tune in to the subtlety of discomfort, or the subtlety of irritation, and not to keep overriding. Look there, take a look there, see what it is that I'm believing, because it's not going to be, it's going to be believing something that's not true. Thank you, Mahalia.
Thank you.
So it's about 4, it's 4.
Is it?
It's 4 o'clock, yeah, we're at the top of the hour here. So thank you, everyone, and we're going to go into meditation now. For any of you who would like to stay, please do. If you'd like to leave, please exit. And just a gentle reminder that your donations are deeply appreciated and welcomed. So there's a basket here, and there's Venmo and PayPal if you're online.
Aloha.
Aloha, sweetheart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Polly. Aloha,
Aloha, sweetheart. I don't know, can they hear me when I talk?
Linda.
Linda.
Yeah.
We were gonna talk about your questions, Linda.
Okay, blessings.
Blessing. Time is the strangest thing, isn't it?